Well, hello. Thanks for tuning in again for another edition of This Week in Haiti for November 30th. And we're back roughly around the usual time on a Sunday. Uh, this week, the main discussion for the week has been centered around Jean Max Louissaint and what happened to him in the Dominican Republic. Um, that was the main topic for the issue review, and it's what we're gonna focus on primarily for today, as well as some of the other stories that we had for the week in this week's edition, but that one being the one that hits closest to home. So I think we should start off and maybe just by initially giving the narrative of what happened for those who are listening and hadn't caught the press conference or been able to read the articles or even seen the arrest warrant that was had been initially put out some time ago. So yeah, what is the full narrative
Right.
of this?
Well, before I give the full narrative on that, I think it'll get very long. I think I should maybe give a thumbnail of the sort of governmental crisis that is kind of the second headline this week, and generally that is bigger crisis technically, but in many ways the lessons of Jean Max Louissaint or Ralph Laurent's situation is better. But the cover top article of Haiti Liberté this past week is about the sort of imbroglio that has developed in the what is called the Transitional Presidential Council, the CPT, Conseil Présidentiel de Transition, which is, as most of our viewers will know, is the 9-member, 7 of them voting, 2 of them observer, presidential body that was concocted by Anthony Blinken and the State Department back in April of 2023 April of 2024 to run Haiti until an elected government could be put in place. Again, the last election in Haiti was in 2016. So basically, pretty soon will be a decade since we've had an election in Haiti. So the 9-member council, as I say, the 2 non-voting members represent the human rights community and the I think civil society, something along those lines. Two totally meaningless seats and individuals, but the key sort of core voting group are 7 members representing a couple of the political parties and then coalitions of other parties. The 2 main political parties represented are the Lavalas Family Party, represented by Leslie Voltaire, and then the Petit Dessalines, the Children of Dessalines, the founding father of Haiti Party, which is represented by a guy called Vertelaire. Now, these the other 5 groups are coalitions of smaller parties, basically, going across the spectrum from left to right. The Montana group, which is one of those coalitions, is almost like a party, sort of what they call the bourgeoisie éclairée, the enlightened bourgeoisie party. And they are the people who came with the idea of Haitian-led transition, and yet they immediately jumped into this U.S. State Department-led transition because their slogan is completely hypocritical and meaningless. They spent their whole time, even before they got a seat on the presidential council, lobbying to get Washington's support, as if they felt the only way they could have any success would be with Washington's support. So it's kind of a joke party, or typical of this current of not only the liberal bourgeoisie, but also really the ultra left in Haiti, what we sometimes call the NGO left or the fake left, which has anti-imperialist or anti-NGO or anti-foreign interference rhetoric, but it totally plays along with that, and in fact lives off of it. So their representative of this Montana group, for one reason or another, was targeted last week by the spokesman of the U.S. government, but anonymously. It was they said there's a member on the presidential council who we have put sanctions on, revoked his visa, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody knew who this was. It's a lot of speculation. And it wasn't until the next day, the article on our cover explains that the AP made clear that it was Fritz Alphonse Jean, who is the Montana group's leader and or representative, and he was their presidential candidate at one point when they thought there might be elections. Now, Fritz Alphonse Jean has a long history of basically being some sort of bureaucrat for the empire, worked at an IFI, an international financial institution. I don't recall now, I didn't check before this show, whether it was the World Bank or the Inter-American Development Bank or the International Monetary Fund, but it was one of them. And he has some pedigree as a capable technocrat, but liberal leaning, etc. But they sanctioned him, and because they sanctioned him, suddenly he started to talk bad about the empire. He started to say, "Oh, what right do they have to sanction me? What does the U.S. empire," and of course their lapdog Canada also sanctioned him. What do these two embassies, these two ambassadors of Canada and the U.S., what business do they have dictating to the Haitian Presidential Council, who is supposed to be which is supposed to be a sovereign body? Who are they to dictate this? Well, look in the mirror, Fritz Alphonse Jean. You and your colleagues there were the ones who made this situation. You were the ones who gave the U.S. Embassy, the U.S. government, and the Canadian government the power to essentially be your masters. And now that you're feeling the sting of that and the humiliation of that dominance, now you're denouncing it. Why didn't you denounce it when they designated the Viva Some political party, the coalition of armed groups in Haiti, Greater Port-au-Prince, in Haiti's capital? Why didn't you say something about it then? Asked the author. Is it Isabelle Papillon who wrote this week's? Isabelle Papillon asked in her article about the situation with this. So it's essentially a case of being hoisted by your own petard. That now he finds himself on the outs. Now, he was one of the members of this CPT who was leading the charge to oust Prime Minister Alex Didier Fils-Aimé, who came in shortly after the ouster of his predecessor as Prime Minister, Gary Coney, who was also some sort of U.S. lackey, but they had some problems with him, and we won't go into all of that. So Alex Fils-Aimé came in, and it's looking like he will end up, it's looking right now in at the end of November, the last day of November 2025, as if he may be the last man left standing after February 7th, 2026, when the CPT expires, according to the mandate they gave themselves, because that was the date on which they were supposed to be inaugurating a newly elected Haitian government. Now, if that's the case, that they expire, they are essentially collectively the heads of state, there will only be the head of government, which is Alex Fils-Aimé. And that will mean we'll have a situation very similar to that of Ariel Henry, who became more or less the prime minister, but also the president of Haiti from July of 2021 until February of 2024, when he was ousted by the Vivre Ensemble political party. I mean, it wasn't a political party at that point, it was still just a coalition, but those groups were the ones responsible for ousting him, which was the wish of the entire nation. He had no popularity anywhere. So the same situation appears to be in store for Alex Fils-Aimé, because he is already completely unpopular, and even more unpopular right now because the US and Canadian embassy have gone and sanctioned, basically wrapped across the knuckles, this other puppet that they put in, Fritz Alphonse Jean, for trying to kick him out. So they say that Fritz Alphonse Jean has association with gangs. That's how they call the armed groups, to villainize and demonize them. And they say that he is basically undermining, putting a stick in the spokes of the process to hold elections and put in a new government. So the population has doubled its disgust for Didier Fils-Aimé because of this support, essentially, that the US and Canada have shown for him. Now, in the days since this article appeared on Wednesday, the current president, because it's a rotating presidency, our listeners will know, in the fourth and last president is a guy called Laurent Saint-Cyr. Now, of the 7 voting members, he's the only one which has no political party. Who does he represent? You guessed it, the bourgeoisie, the Haitian bourgeoisie. So all the other 6 members have to be these sort of either coalitions or parties, coalitions of parties or a single party. But he just represents the bourgeoisie, the business sector. They have the privilege, among all the others, of having their own seat. And he essentially sided with the US embassy and the Canadian embassy against Fritz Jean. So the only other member of the CPT that has come out publicly in support of Fritz Jean is Leslie Voltaire of the Lavalas family. So essentially, it looks like the project which the CPT has proposed of extending their mandate for another year is not going to really fly, because they have huge division among each other. None of them are supporting the other. They need 5 votes to pass anything, any changes. And right now, and ironically, it was the Montana group, it was Fritz Jean who proposed this thing of moving it from 4 votes to 5 votes. So it's now harder for them to change anything because they need 5 votes. Why did they move it from 4? Would have been the natural amount because you really have only 7 voting members, so a majority would be 4. But they were trying to play and rig the game, so they said no, because we have 9 members with the 2 observers, we're going to make it 5 votes, and they thought that that would sort of freeze things. Well, yeah, it did, and now they're again hoisted by their own petard for coming with that. So after bringing the U.S. in as the overseer of this puppet presidential council, after changing the rules so that it makes it harder to change anything, it looks like at this point, short of something else happening, the CPT will expire on February 7th, 2026, and Alex Fils-Aimé will become the last man standing as the prime minister and as the U.S. puppet, because they have no problem at all with Fils-Aimé. In fact, that's why they sanctioned Fritz Alphonse Jean, because he was pushing to oust Fils-Aimé and put in somebody else. So
Is
that's that wrap-up.
Fils-Aimé, as the prime minister, also technically a member on the CPT?
No, he is not a member of the CPT. The CPT are the heads of state in principle, and he is simply the way under the Constitution, the president appoints the head of government. So the head of government runs the government for the president, or in this case, the presidents, but he is not a member of it. So he can be either fired or hired by the CPT.
Okay.
They need, though, 5 votes to fire him, and it looks like none of the others are willing to step up. The only one who has stepped up to support and stood behind Fritz Jean as he put his completely hypocritical but very impassioned outrage against being slapped on the wrist by the U.S. was Leslie Voltaire of the Lavalas family. So anyway, that's sort of the background story. It's an interesting one, kind of a tempest in a teapot, because it's all basically within the puppet stage of the U.S. So it doesn't really mean anything, because this government is de facto illegitimate, illegal, and unpopular. So it doesn't really even mean anything, because the real political struggle is happening outside of it. It is simply the puppet institution put in place by the U.S. to try to hold Haiti and keep it as a neo-colony.
And I think we can turn to the story as well. So while that is happening in the transitional government, we were following this story, and we talked a little bit about it in the issue review for this week. To some extent, the context that's missing for that, for viewers, that's connected to what we were just discussing, is that the closeness between the government in the Dominican Republic and this, de facto illegitimate government, but that they're both connected by being subservient to U.S. imperialism. So that was kind of the case, because I presume that the arrest warrant that was issued, that was used as kind of the pretext, was issued under the current CPT government, because it wasn't that.
Yes, well, that we can go into that detail, because it's kind of interesting. The arrest warrant, okay, Jean Max Louissaint, Ralph Laurent, and his program on YouTube, for those who would like to see it. You can find the links in the Haiti Liberté articles on this. We will have one out shortly, probably later today or tomorrow, by our Santo Domingo correspondent, Noah Batley, who was instrumental in getting Louissaint, I'm going to call him Max for this process, even though Ralph Laurent is his stage or online name. But she was really the one who was instrumental in getting Max freed, because she's a one-woman army of reporting, lobbying, investigating, and I could say championing the case of Max Louissaint, as you will see. So essentially, the former chief of police, a guy called Rameau Normil, a lot of people call him Normil Rameau, thinking Rameau is his family name, but his family name is Normil, in fact. So Rameau Normil was the former chief of police until fairly recently. I forget the exact date, but he was not on the good side of Alex Fils-Aimé. And he was ousted and replaced by a guy called Vladimir Paraison, who is closer to Fils-Aimé and works under Fils-Aimé. So Rameau Normil, and I'm going to say it was probably in May or June, was replaced sometime this past summer. And he was very close to an internet pundit called Morvan, Jean Coleman Morvan, who is based in Canada, but is somehow spokesman for the police and anti-vivant Somme pundit. A guy who's been caught lying once very clearly. He totally lied about a guy. The guy won the suit against him and didn't ask him for monetary damages, just said, you got to go on the radio and tell everybody that you lied, which he had to do. But nonetheless, he continues for some reason, even though his credibility is zero, and even though he makes up total fabricated fake news almost every time he opens his mouth. But he essentially directed or influenced Rameau Normil to issue a arrest warrant in November 2024, basically a year ago, against, in fact, I think it was almost on this very day, a year ago, against Jean Max Louissaint, another internet, I could say, personality and journalist, often writes in and for Haiti Liberté, called Kervins Louissaint, and a woman called Beta Prosper, who's in Canada. So yeah, there's the page which shows the arrest warrant right there. If you can see it, you can zoom in with your camera, and you can see avis de recherche, notice of, a wanted notice for him. And what was he wanted for in this was for association de malfaiteurs, meaning criminal association, and incitation à la violence, inciting violence. Now, the criminal association was almost comic because this was what was used by the Duvalier regime and the neo-Duvalierist regimes after the overthrow of Duvalier in 1986, always to round up anybody who was fighting against their dictatorship. So already you can see it's a completely vague, meaningless term, a little bit like the terrorist label that they put on any enemy here in the US. Against the enemies of the US, and including the Vivant Somme. And then inciting violence. This is, again, another silly and completely false charge. So we wrote about that immediately when it came out in Haiti Liberté. You can find that article on the Haiti Liberté website. So when we did the long press conference, it was almost 4 hours long, with Max Louissaint, with Noah Batley, our correspondent in Santo Domingo, Haiti Liberté's correspondent, with Kervins Louissaint, and with a guy called Johnny Eliasant in Florida, who organized the live stream. So you can find that on the Haiti Liberté website as well, and watch it. If you're Creole speaking, you can watch the entire 3 hour and 50-minute stream. And if you're just English speaking, the first hour is essentially a summary of what happened with Noah Batley, who left us. And so it was just Kervins, myself, and Johnny who were interviewing Max. So in the course of that, it was explained that not only the background of this completely fallacious arrest warrant, but the fact that as of the unveiling of the new P&H, that's the Haitian National Police, the new P&H website, the wanted list contained no mention of any of those 3 warrants. So as a result, this warrant was apparently just abandoned or thrown in the garbage by the current Haitian National Police. However, when Max Louissaint, and I'm going to basically make a little summary of what was discussed in that show, when Max was getting off the plane in Santo Domingo to where he was going to handle some business that he had there, a trip that had long been delayed because of that very arrest warrant, as phony as it was. But he had done research. He had found that Interpol was not looking for him, that nobody was taking this arrest warrant seriously. But when he got to the immigration desk where you go, and usually you give your fingerprints and so forth, and the guy said, "Oh, go over to that room there." And he went into the room and they had detained him. And they held him and they checked through his stuff and they wanted to go through his phone and etc. And eventually they took him to what's called the detention center of what's called the DGM, the General Direction of Migration, in Haina, which is a town just outside of Santo Domingo. And we'll get into the conditions there in a moment. But on the way there, the guy in the front seat of the car turned around and said, so you never say anything against the gangs, against the bad guys in Haiti, so something like that to Max. So immediately he got the sense of where this was, what was behind this, because he'd been asking, why are you arresting me? Why are you holding me? I haven't done anything. I've never committed a crime. I've never been arrested. I've never been even charged. So they took him, and so this was clearly, they didn't say it was precisely due to this arrest warrant, but it was because of his association, because he has the freedom or I could say the présence d'esprit, the enlightenment to interview the Vivant Ensemble members, in particular Jimmy Barbecue Cherizier, the leader of the Vivant Ensemble. So because he doesn't flinch, because he's not scared of interviewing these guys and finding out their point of view and what they want and how they see the future of Haiti, he is being called a spokesman, and by many, including this moron, Morvan. In fact, they should change Morvan to moron. They say he's the big brain behind it. He's the mastermind behind Vivant Ensemble. So these kind of things. So somehow this filtered in the most charitable interpretation of these events. This filtered to the Dominican police. But as you said, Joseph, the Dominican state has been working very closely with this puppet Haitian state in every way, and both of them are the complete puppets of the U.S. state. As a matter of fact, right now, I was recently told that they are setting up U.S. bases. In fact, Pete Hegseth was in Dominican Republic to work for this setting up of the bases for what will apparently be an attack on Venezuela. We've already seen it with the bombing of all these boats, completely extrajudicial, just in complete flagrant total violation of international law, that they're just blowing up boats, often with fishermen and completely innocent civilians aboard, in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, which has raised every hair on the back of Latin America. And any patriotic Latin American is looking at this in horror and outrage. So, but Dominican Republic is allowing itself, and it should be said that there's a very large prostitution industry in Dominican Republic, that they are becoming the prostitute themselves to the US for this intervention, apparently. I guess the bases in Puerto Rico either were not enough, or the fact that many Puerto Ricans have been demonstrating against the US using Puerto Rico as an offshore base for organizing and planning and re-equipping and supplying this interventionist force, which is floating around the Caribbean just off of Venezuela's shores. Okay, so all of this to say that the completely legal and independent work and broadcasts that Max Louissaint, as Ralph Laurent, does on his program, Live Tambour Verité, which has over 30,000 subscribers. And I saw when he started, it was 30.2 thousand. Now I think it's something like 30.7 thousand, if I recall well from looking at it this morning. So he's going up, at least another maybe 500, or I'm sure it will grow. They've increased his appeal. They've heightened his profile. However, so they pulled him aside and they brought him to this hyena facility. And the person he called when he found himself there in the morning, early, about 2 or 3 in the morning, was me. He called me. But at night, I get so many calls from Haiti during the night for, whatever problems people are facing, that I tend to put it on mute and let, the message just be left there. So, but he did have the presence of mind to call me twice at about 5 in the morning, and the second time rang, and I picked up my phone and I saw this number, which was from a guy in Ivory Coast, apparently, who lent his phone to Max, whose phone had been confiscated. And Max said, "Kim, I'm in big trouble. I'm here in DR. They've arrested me, and there's talk of them sending me back to Haiti." Now, Max is a naturalized U.S. citizen, so that would be, again, completely illegal. But in this period of complete illegality under Trump and Hegseth and Marco Rubio, you don't know what will happen. So I immediately called Noah, or texted Noah, and got in touch with her. And she dashed down to the immigration what they call administrative offices. In fact, it's like a big courthouse, administrative court, where they hold people and basically decide on their fate there, whether to deport them or let them in or whatever. So this hyena facility, however, not just to dwell on it, is a total a monstrosity, a crime against humanity in itself, because in the live stream that you can again listen to on the Haiti Liberté website, and I should say that most of what I'm about to explain is in the Creole portion, not in the English. But the conditions there are horrendous, and there was nowhere to sleep. There was hardly anywhere to even pee or do any toiletries, to wash, to do any kind of. It's a hell, and it has seen 3 deaths already in 2000. in 2025. And there's an article in this week's paper, the death of a baby at the detention center for migrants in Haina. And this was a death on the 14th of November. It was the newborn child of a woman called Melissa Jean-Baptiste, who was arrested in Bani, which is in the southwest of Haiti, a very remote, desolate area. And although the child was Dominican, because in the Dominican Republic, your nationality is not, and this child's father was Dominican. So even though the mom was Haitian, the father was Dominican. So this child had no business being in a detention center, and they should have put the mother and the child, who was, again, newly born, in a hospital of some sort. But they did not. They brought the child with the mother to the detention center, and the child died on November 14th. And that is just the third of two other. On the 23rd of June, an American citizen, Frances Ellen Houellette, died in this detention center. And a Haitian by the name of Gedia Lonzadieu died on the 9th of September. And now this is in addition to 54 other Haitians who have died in the course of this Dominican migration policy, which dictates under President Luis Abinader that 10,000 Haitians be arrested and deported every week. So I don't need to tell you what kind of arbitrary, rootless, erroneous, crazy sweeps and injustices are caused by this policy, where thousands of Dominicans with Haitian parentage, with Haitian ancestry of some sort, but maybe their mother or father were Dominican, so they are Dominican, but because of their dark skin, they get swept up, thrown into these hellholes, and then deported back to Haiti, where often they don't even speak Creole, where often they don't have any family or anybody to help them. So they're left completely naked, one could say, in a country which is undergoing a revolution, a civil war. So this is the world that Jean Max Louissaint was cast on that November 23rd, that morning of November 23rd when he called me. So essentially, you will read in Haiti Liberté very shortly, because I will post it, because Noah has already filed her article. I just haven't gone through and edited it. But you will see exactly the process from her point of view, what happened. And again, on the Haiti Liberté site, you can see Max's. But essentially, there was a great deal of pressure put on both the U.S. Embassy and Haitian officials. Noah, who in fact works currently for the environmental ministry in Dominican Republic, was buttonholing the interior minister of Dominican Republic there in the halls of this administration center. All kinds of officials, the soldiers who were guarding the place. She was making calls to the embassy, to all human rights groups, to lawyers, to journalists. And the sad reality, as she will report and you will read, is that many, many, many of them would not touch this case with a 10-foot pole because of the terrible propaganda and image that has been put on Haitians, particularly Haitians who have any kind of dealings or connection or sympathy or interest in the Vive Ensemble Alliance, which is a political party now, which is essentially challenging this corrupt government, which I began this live stream talking about, and have become, in some ways, the real power and the most popular of forces in Haiti, even though there are many people who are still scared of them or don't like them. There's a lot of propaganda from both the right and the left. There are many on the left, believe it or not, who are a complete strict alignment with Marco Rubio and call, the Vivre Ensemble terrorists and blah, blah, blah. Even though the real terrorism, by the reports of the United Nations itself, most of the terrorism is being carried out by the Haitian police and their paramilitaries, which are called brigades. These are basically groups of young men that they pay and give weapons and vehicles and money to fight with the insurgents. And what are the demands of the Vivre Ensemble insurgency? Very simple: schools, hospitals, roads, sanitation, electricity, housing, etc., etc. They want the rudiments of life, which the Haitian masses, particularly those in the cities, who are often dispossessed peasants or the children or grandchildren of dispossessed peasants in the countryside, they've been living essentially in garbage and sewage in terribly, horribly neglected slums for decades. In fact, just as an aside, on December 8th, 5:30 p.m. in Los Angeles, we'll have the West Coast premiere of Bitter Cane, a film I did in 1983, which shows the beginning of this process of the disintegration of the Haitian economy that began at that time. So anybody in Los Angeles, check out, they can check out Haiti Liberté or my Twitter feed, Kim Ives 13, to see about this showing in Santa Monica on the 8th, which shows the beginning of this disintegration of the countryside economy. So the cities have swollen. The lumpen proletariat and proletariat of the cities is now, in the case of Port-au-Prince, for example, 3 million people from 500,000 when we did Bitter Cane back in 1983 when it was released. So this shows you the drama of the situation, that the people have gotten to a point where they will no longer accept to live under these conditions. So turning back to Jean Max Louissaint, his case was championed by NOAA despite the trepidation, the fear, I could even say trauma that many groups, even supposed human rights groups, even supposed progressive groups in Dominican Republic were afraid of this, if not because they don't understand it, because they were afraid of what the response of the government would be. But due to her persistence and the persistence of others sending letters, in our article this week in the paper, we speak about Jean-Marc Mesidor, who heads a group called the GADH, G-A-D-H, which stands for the Action for Human Rights. I forget the exact acronym, the meaning of the words, or what the words are that make the acronym. But he sent a letter to the U.S. Embassy saying, why on earth are you holding this guy? He's done nothing. There's no reason. So another key point that was made in this live stream is that he was not deported. He was not deported because of any crime. He was simply, they dropped the holding, but because of the circumstances, he thought it was best to just go back to the U.S., back to New Jersey, where he's based, and get out of that situation in Dominican Republic. Because as you said, Joseph, both the Dominican government and the Haitian government are some sort of lackey governments whose actions are very unpredictable and very dangerous. So he got out of that dangerous situation and is back in the States. So maybe you can take it where I might have missed.
Well, I feel a little bit compelled or maybe obligated, since at the end there you started talking about the positive response and solidarity that was shown by many, our correspondent in the DR, and human rights groups, and in various capacities, to talk about my own kind of phenomenological experience of everything that was happening on the day it was happening, on Tuesday and Wednesday of this past week. Well, just one, particular aspect of it, which was kind of vicariously seeing you battling it out with a bunch of, different groups, and trying to get them to do something in the different ways that you can to, lobby and put pressure, in that moment where you're not really sure, well, what even can I do? Because it seems as if we're gonna watch a man be slowly, led to his death, and we can't really, we're not sure what, what we could do to impede that. But my experience of watching that was just the agonizing frustration, particularly with some of these Western NGOs and committees to defend journalists and whatnot.
I think we can give the name. Yes, Committee to Protect Journalists. So
Yeah.
I think you overheard that.
Yeah,
call.
I
Yes.
mean the name is one thing. A lot of NGOs have very nice names, and they can sort of hide behind that moniker to some degree. But of course, it's kind of contrived, especially when you're only focused on one, the good journalists or the perfect victims who are saints and martyrs, and get to be defended because they fit a certain criterion of what a journalist looks like and should do, and etiquette and whatnot.
And have the right credentials and bona
right,
fides and
credentials
licensing.
and that might even, dare I say, to some degree, go down to where they're based, where they're working out of, might also impact it, because there is a bias amongst this coterie of NGO people, many of whom are well educated, and I can say are coming at it from a perspective of, this is my job, and my job also happens to be something I'm passionate about, and so I'm kind of doing the right thing, and that's my living that I'm enacting. And particularly when that aspect of it boils down to just being in meetings and lobbying and talking to the same people that we are criticizing and we are campaigning against, that you spend most of your time sort of trying to sanitize or argue, no, we can have a rational conversation with these people, like Eric Prince, right? You can have a rational conversation with them and attempt to show them the right side, or whatever the logic is. But it amounts to just, a lot of the NGO world is like that, having to argue that it's appropriate to go to those with power and sort of beg and plead them to relinquish their power or whatever. So I think that a lot of, I mean, you kind of began us off by criticizing this NGO left, and I think that criticism applied to a lot of what we witnessed happening during this whole situation, where we just start to wonder, can these people be relied upon at all?
Right.
If they don't, for one thing, they don't consistently, their politics are consistently bad. And then we're at the point where it's like, well, they're leftists in name only, basically. but yeah, if it's going to be in name only, and they're going to do everything that the other side, that we're criticizing, especially just even boiling down to talking to people like Eric Prince, or having such an obsequious tone when it comes to those with power. So how should we even entertain having any kind of coalitions? I think in this case, and you mentioned, I don't want to have a blanket condemnation of all these groups, or because we mentioned, you mentioned Comrade Mesidor, who there are examples of being very helpful. And even if you're really being analytical about it, all NGOs are not made equal. NGOs that are in the global south are just on a materialist analysis of their relation to the means of production, whatnot, are not the same as those in the north, where there might as well just be, like Oxfam and whatnot, might as well just be part of might as well just be for profit, but just call themselves not for profit. So that's very different. But I think in this scenario, I was just immensely frustrated listening to this phone call that you were doing, where it just amounted to a lot of like Kafka-esque games of, is this, like we're watching someone possibly going to die, and time is of the essence, as it always is in all these scenarios, but particularly it felt very impactful with a close comrade of ours, and we're having to sit and kind of, meander and twiddle our thumbs about certain criterion and whatnot. So that was
the meandering and thumb twiddling was really, we don't really know. We can't be sure. We have to be careful. We have to guard our reputation. We want to make sure he's not just an activist. What media does he work for? And that's the irony. I mean, on the one hand, there's some sort of institutional prejudice, I could say.
Journalist is here an activist.
Yeah, right. And there's an institutional prejudice that if you're not employed by the New York Times or the Miami Herald or the Washington Post or the Chicago Tribune or the Los Angeles Times or some major urban daily in the US, you are not a real journalist. You are not a part of CBS or NBC or CNN or Al Jazeera even. So this is a total, I could say, blindness to the current reality, where many of our most valiant and effective journalists are independent journalists. Glenn Greenwald, Chris Hedges, you can take Seymour Hersh. These are all journalists who once worked for the mainstream legacy media, but left it because they found that this media was trying to cover up the truth, cover up the stories, especially if they were going to be, or precisely because they would work against the empire that they are part of. So this is essentially a definition of Jean Max Louissaint. He is an independent, a Haitian working class guy who ends up in the United States, but his heart is in Haiti.
And also using new media too, I think.
And using new media, using the media that is not as controlled or as licensed. And this question of licensing, this was the origin of press freedom, was the King of England ordering printing press owners, which was a big deal back in the 18th century, like Benjamin Franklin. He owned a printing press. And the King of England was saying, we have to license you to have that press. That is, we want to be able to control what that press prints. And the printer said, no way, you're not going to control what we print. We have a press, it belongs to us. We're going to print and say what we want to say and print. And this is the same thing that's happening now, and we see it in social media. Now, let's not have any illusions. Social media is owned by billionaires, by these corporate entities which have an agenda. Their first agenda is to sell you stuff and make money off of you, putting ads on there and using it and seeing it. They have your eyeballs, but they also want your wallets. But increasingly, it has been used, the masses and people like Jean Max Louissaint, alias Ralph Laurent, have used it to put out a message which is counter to their interests. And so they're trying to find a way, and this is not a secret. Hillary Clinton, a number of other politicians have spoken about this and said, we got to get a hold of social media because it's out of control. It's saying too many things we don't want to hear. And we see it with Larry Ellison, the number one contributor to the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, the Israeli army that's committing a genocide in Gaza and increasingly in the West Bank of Palestine. He has bought TikTok, or he is part of the group. He's the principal or the major figure in the group that has bought TikTok in the US because the US forced TikTok to be sold from the company that owned it, the Chinese company that owned it, to American control. And of course, as people know, Ellison has also purchased CBS, including CBS News, has purchased Paramount, which makes movies, which, develop the world outlook of people who watch those movies. Paramount is, of course, a big studio in Hollywood. So increasingly, they are trying, and there's talk of Ellison also trying to purchase, I think, X, formerly Twitter, which already is in the hands of a Zionist, although a slightly erratic one in the form of Elon Musk. So all of this to say that this social media is working and increasingly going to be working against voices promoting change, particularly revolutionary change, particularly sovereignty in neo-colonies, the freedom of neo-colonies, against the wars, against the war in Ukraine, in Gaza, the coming war in Venezuela, or again, I shouldn't say coming, it's already here. They're waging war against Venezuela and Colombia too, for that matter.
They just closed down the airspace.
They'd close down the airspace. You see, I didn't of Venezuela or Colombia. Venezuela. Okay, you see, I'm not even up on the news because I'm. But Haiti is one of the principal and very important for our people watching this to know. And I can't see. I see a number of quite a few comments coming in. Maybe you can see them with your 23-year-old eyes, but. My point being that Haiti is essentially one of the battlefields of this imperialist war. And the Vivant Somme are the principal force that are resisting them, are fighting for Haitian sovereignty, for Haitian nationalism. And this is why Jean Max Louissaint was arrested, because he is on the wrong side of that imperialist war. He is defending Haitian sovereignty, Haitian independence, the Haitian flag, the Dessalinian, Jean-Jacques Dessalines' ideals, which was that Haiti is an independent country and always will be.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, we do have quite a few comments. So I think maybe I'll just go and
dash over there and
read
read some of them.
From here, but I will just pick a couple maybe, and maybe if they're questions.
We should bring some binoculars for your kids.
If any are in the form of a question, that'd be good, because that gives us something to kind of
respond
answer.
to.
But
yeah.
If not, if they're just comments, we can also.
You want to go over, and I'll hold the fort here while you read what they're saying. Okay, so again, hats off really to Joseph Mullen, because he's the one who has pioneered and made sure that this podcast starts. Some people are beginning to see.
I think it's mostly, as I was saying, kind of mostly positive comments.
Mostly positive, good. We like positive.
having.
Wait, you better come back to your mic to tell us.
Well, let me just get another
He's going to get a
glimpse,
sense.
just to.
So he's giving I'm translating a short report that he's giving. Oh no, you're close to the mic there, so maybe your voice will come,
Well,
even though it's not amplified. Okay.
People probably heard me just saying that it's.
You got to bring it closer.
Most of the comments are just, and we appreciate, the positive feedback, that it's mostly positive messages to us, but especially, I think, appreciation for the work that was done to help Max get released. And I think you were mentioning, there's always some debate about, with online stuff in general, how true it is, or the appearance versus reality.
All those bots and trolls.
Yeah, but especially when, like all technology, it's really just an instrument or a tool. It depends whose hands it's being utilized by. But so it's very hard to gauge whether something is astroturfed and kind of just has a massive amount of capital pumped into it to make it look like something legit.
What we call a psychological operation, a psyop.
Yeah. So much of this stuff, is the ideology is sometimes pretty apparent what it is, because sometimes it's blatant, but then sometimes it's kind of masked behind, especially for, I think, younger people experience that there's so much stuff that's targeted towards our demographic, our age group, whatever, and it's trying to use this veneer of being youthful and whatever. And especially that I think younger people get pushed into having to, well, a lot of, I think, again, with technology being influenced by the forces of production and class conflict, is that young people, working class people, gravitate to stuff that's free. And that's, to some degree, not the only reason, but we have talked about how, like, TikTok is really popular amongst the Haitian community, and live streams are really popular amongst young people, for one reason or another again. But that's all to say that to have someone like Max, who has both like a quantifiably very high amount of following and reach, beyond just including, and also beyond, like, the metrics, the classic metrics of impressions and reach and stuff, has that, and also has an outpouring of support from people in the comments, has the real kind of sympathy that we would hope, as journalists and people who are working on behalf of the proletarian cause, right, in general, activists, journalists, as if there's this dichotomy as well, which is very stupid that this NGO dude had set up. But to see that is really impressive, and it's, I think, to think that like Marx and Engels were journalists to begin with.
Yeah, they were.
The Frankfurt Zeitung.
And even Lenin, when he had to fill a form, and they said, "What's your profession?" He put journalist.
Yeah,
So.
and that's I think just very impressed to see people, like the other day I was on the bus, and somebody's on the bus, and I mean, I'm not always able to fully understand everything with someone watching on TikTok, or someone even had like their Bluetooth speaker hooked up and is like playing it out loud on the bus, which is always cool, because I don't always like to, people just have their headbuds on, so you're kind of, if you start talking to someone or they're talking to someone out loud on the phone, and you can't see that their headbuds are like covered by a hat or whatever, are you talking to me? But this guy had his Bluetooth speaker and he's listening to something, and it's about the situation with Max.
Oh, is that right? You didn't tell me about this.
The biggest news stories that was, going on, in addition to just updates about Vive Ensemble and updates about the, ongoing political events, that's such a big news story because so many people who are looking for an alternative perspective have someone with Max who can have that. So that was cool, to see that there was
Wow, that's cool. I didn't hear about that. No.
and again, that solidarity was needed because you don't really have, it's not really forthcoming from the classical sources of power, but that also it's legit. It's coming from a groundswell of support from people who don't want to see.
Santo Domingo also has many Haitians on it, and at one point, as Max explains in the live stream we had, he had little money left from an account he opened in Santo Domingo years ago when he had been there. And he said, I don't want that money to go to waste, because he saw these people in terrible need in the prison. And there was one woman in particular with a child who was dying and who had no money and was in terrible straits. And he wanted to be able to give her some money, this little money that he had in a bank, not a lot, but something. And so the guards took him to the bank, accompanied him to the bank in handcuffs to get this money out. And the Haitian saw him on the street and said, "Oh, Ralph, it's you." And he wanted to take a selfie with Ralph. So we have that picture of that selfie being taken with the two guards watching him on our Haiti Liberté article that's up on the site right now. And so in any case, yes, this is the danger of a Max Louissaint, of a Ralph Laurent, because they speak truth, they speak honestly, they are not beholden to the corporate censors and powers which are trying to change the narrative and brainwash people. So he has obviously some huge popularity, and that's a lot of the popularity one could say of Jimmy Cherizier, because he comes and he just spouts, he's a geyser of truth every time, and he gives all the backstory. I mean, this is his principal weapon. It's not any M16 or a gun of any sort. It's his weapon. His mouth is his biggest weapon. So this is, or I should say, brain and honesty. So these make you a big threat. Honesty is the most dangerous thing right now for the empire, because they are basically an empire of lies. So that's really, I think, the takeaway from this whole episode, and that also people power counts. When people are mobilized and they can see it, and they sensed that it would be worse for them to do their deeds in Haiti. I just was distracted by a little mouse I saw over there. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know where we need to go after this. If we need,
it's been an hour.
About an hour, so we're good. Maybe
we don't have any questions or someone looking for like a response. So I think the positive feedback is always greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And we're going to improve. Max has told us that he's going to work with us in getting us a little less primitive in our presentation. We, as you can see, just basically flip the laptop open and start to do this. But this is, of course, the danger of this new media that they're using, that they put out, and we're going to make the most of it that we can. And maybe the algorithms will try to sync us. We put all of these This Week in Haiti discussions that we have on our website, haitiliberté.com. So just go to the video part of that, and you'll find these talks and these reflections that we have.
Well, I think next week, of course, because this was resolved, we won't focus so much more on it. And I think that the fact that this happened to someone, a close contact, and I think
But you'll probably have another guest because I will be in Los Angeles
Right.
next weekend. And so Joseph will have a guest. I don't know if
Yeah.
it will be me from Los Angeles or maybe
That's
Kervins
possible.
or Max or somebody.
Yeah, I mean,
Or maybe Bethany. Maybe Bethany can be.
yeah, I think I would be very eager to hear about the response in LA to the film.
Yeah, it won't actually be till Monday. The showing is on Monday.
So that might be something
Yeah.
our listeners are interested in. But either way, we will continue to break down this kind of ongoing. This was what we began talking about. The kind of emerging that the foundation is
Crumbling.
faltering for sure, and we hope to see by this kind of fake announcement date of February for this supposed election that really would be kind of a very transparent lie that will hopefully be exposed by the coming year. But either way, we'll continue to be having that as this kind of main discussion, main event that's ongoing, that we started off with the real infighting that's ongoing within this comprador government. So thank you for tuning in to the live stream, and we will see you next week.